Audio Jungle.
Thank you for dedicating time to join us today. We trust you and your loved ones are well and in good health. On behalf of our director, Dr. Maruki Durango, Colombia Global Centers Nairobi welcomes you to our webinar this evening. Digitized Education, Parents as Teachers. This is part 2 of this series. In part 1, we focused on educators. Today, we will focus on parents who have been faced with the daunting task of ensuring their children keep up with learning. Not only is this an unfamiliar territory for many, it has added to the burden of the household responsibilities, let alone the fears and anxieties that have come with the pandemic. Colombia Global Centers are a dynamic group of 9 centers positioned strategically around the world by Columbia University. The centers facilitate collaborations between Columbia University, academic community with local partners to engage in research and education activities, which also include serving as a platform for knowledge sharing and problem solving. Please remember that as we proceed, you're most welcome to post your questions and comments in the Q&A section. I would now like to hand over to our moderator today, Dalia Hamza Constantine, a doctoral candidate in curriculum and teaching at Teachers College, Columbia University. Over to you, Dalia.
Thank you so much, Pauline, and I'm really looking forward to getting us all started. And we have so many beautiful comments today by our speakers, so I'll get started right away. Our keynote speaker today is going to be Dr. Dietra Price-Dennis, who is my mentor, so I'm very excited to hear from her today. And Dr. Price-Dennis is an associate professor of education in the Department of Mathematics, Science, and Technology at Columbia University's Teachers College. She serves as the co-director of the Reimagining Education Online Advanced Certificate Program and is the founding director of #JustLit. And that's a media-based project that provides multimodal resources about literature, media, and social change in education. She uses ethnographic and sociocultural lenses to examine the intersections of literacy education, technology, and curriculum development as a means to identify and amplify equity-oriented pedagogies of K-8 classrooms. She has experiences in the classroom as an elementary school teacher, and she's one of the most brilliant and compassionate humans I know. So I'll hand it off to you, Dr. Price-Dennis.
Oh, thank you so much, Dalia, for that beautiful and kind, very generous introduction. And hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'll repeat Pauline's directions again, that if you have comments or questions, please use the Q&A, and we're excited to get started. So today I'm just going to take a little bit of time to talk about 3 different points with you, and I look forward to engaging around some of the ideas I share, and I look forward to learning from some of the other panelists later in our webinar today. Right now, because of COVID-19, particularly starting in the spring, so many of us were forced to balance multiple roles and juggle multiple things with our students and our children that we really were not prepared to do, and we hadn't been asked to do before. And so that has presented us with so many options. Those options raise lots of questions about our roles as parents. But I think one thing that's been really exciting to me are the opportunities that have emerged. And so I wanted to talk to you today about those 3 points. The options that we have right now, questions that those options raise, and then opportunities we have to redesign or even reimagine what education can look like as we move forward post-COVID. So there's a lot of language floating around in the education sphere when it comes to the remote emergency learning that we've had to do because of COVID-19. And because of that, there are different learning structures attached to a lot of this language. So we hear a lot about in-person learning, hybrid learning, online learning, and remote learning. And most of those are pretty self-explanatory, but I do like to make a distinction between this notion of online and remote. So remote learning can include online, but it doesn't necessarily mean online. So often I use the term remote because everyone may not have access to digital technology that requires Wi-Fi or broadband. And so it's important to use a term that's a little bit more inclusive to the different types of learning that students may have access to outside of their in-person learning that they do in school. I happen to be in New York City right now, and in New York we are going to use this hybrid model, although parents are offered to be fully online. And at this moment, according to the last data survey that went out, about 1/3 of parents in New York City across all 5 boroughs are opting for some version of hybrid learning, which means students may be in the class 2 to 3 days a week, and then they will be learning from home online 2 to 3 days a week. So we have several options that we're playing around with in New York City. And we're just one small section of the United States. There are lots of other options that are happening in my context, but I wanted to share that in the beginning so we have some common language if questions arise later. So when we think about all of those options that we have and those terminologies, it's really easy as parents to get really confused. So in the beginning of March, we're wondering, and now we're moving into fall, what is our role? What support does my child need as I take on this new role? And then what does this mean for my child? What does it mean for them to be a learner at home during this time? And all of these questions are deeply personal. There isn't one right answer. And so I think, taking some time to reflect on these questions, have conversations in your family, and most importantly in your community, and then with your school leaders is a really important first step. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that first one. Really thinking about what is our role during remote learning as parents? Are we tech support? Is our job to review content, teach content, check for accuracy, evaluate our children's work that they're doing from home? Are we supposed to monitor if they're doing the work? What happens if they're not doing the work? Are we supposed to report? There are so many questions that we're all trying to work through. And again, there isn't one right answer, but these questions, particularly if you keep track of the ones that you have, will really be a stepping stone for you to have conversations with the educators in your community at your school, particularly around what is your role with tech support? Do they have some FAQ page? Do they have a call-in line? Is there someone that kind of roams through the community and helps you out if you need it? What does that look like? With reviewing and teaching content, again, another question to pose to your child's teacher. What is your role around that? Checking for accuracy and evaluation. How do you know if you haven't taken multivariable calculus, and that might be what your child is taking in school? How do you know if their questions are right if that's not a content that you're very familiar with? So I think these are questions I'm posing to you because they're the same questions that I pose and lots of parents have posed that we really need to be in dialogue with our education community with as we move into this next round. I also think that this presents some opportunities for us to redefine learning, particularly as we think about who our children are when they're at home. So how can we use this as an opportunity to think more deeply about how our students, what questions they have about the world, how creative they are? Is there a way that we could take those questions and have them engage in thinking about creating artifacts and making media to share what they're learning? How can we think about the role of self-directed learning? A lot of children right now have a lot of freedom to do that kind of work. And so maybe this is a way forward as we return back together after we have a vaccine or some therapeutics that will allow us to be together again in school buildings. But I think it's a really important moment for us to think about what's possible if we are at home and we have a little bit more say in what our children are doing. And also the importance of choice. How our children are thinking about engaging in the learning that they're being asked to do, how they're representing what they're learning, how they're sharing it, who they're sharing it with, and why they're sharing it. All of those things put the student a little bit more in charge of what's important to them and allow them to show a little bit more of what they know. So there's some steps before we jump into the redefining that I think is really important. The first one, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, is communication. And I'm not really talking right now about communication with your school, but more within your family structure. So in March, the first thing my daughter and I had to sit down and think about together, because she's 8 and she's at home and she's learning from home right now, is what does it mean to be a learner, and in my case, a worker in our home? We've never had to navigate space like this before. So starting with this question, we just brainstormed on a piece of paper, like, what does it mean to do this here? Really helped us set up some boundaries of things that we need. And I'll show you some things that I created based on what we discussed together. The second thing I had to do is I needed to figure out like what my inventory was in my house. What do I have to support remote learning? What do I need to support remote learning? And so I realized my printer was broke, and at this time her school was fully online, so I was going to need to figure out some way to get copies of things that she was being sent before they were able to get a website up and running. So those little bitty things can either create barriers or make sure that we have everything accessible and ready to go. We needed markers and glue sticks and just all kinds of things. So I think it's important just to take stock, but most importantly, once you know what you have and what you don't have, communicate with your school about how they can support, you know, getting some of the things that you need. I don't think that all of it should fall on us as parents to supply everything, and schools do have budgets for supplies. So I really encourage you, once you look at your home and see what type of materials you have, to reach out to your school to figure out, or community organizations, how you all can work together to make sure all children have it. And most importantly, if you find yourself having extra of something, see if there's a space where you can volunteer to drop that off for other families. Sometimes in my building, kids will have a million glue sticks and not kind of the liquid glue that comes out. I call it the old school glue. And so it's nice to know when people have too much of one thing and not enough of the other, because you can just kind of trade and swap. So I really think being creative in those ways, particularly as community members, might be helpful for us as we move forward. And the third piece is, what does your child care about in the world? What are their interests? And how do we take this moment to really build and expand upon their interests in ways that they can show their creativity, in ways that allows them to direct the type of learning that they want to do, and in ways that allows them to create media to share with the world about what's important to them. So some tips that I have around managing this type of work from home, given that everyone's situation is different, and we don't know what the workload is going to be, what the expectations are going to be, until we can have all of that information and really think through that with our kids, is really thinking about time management and organization. Particularly thinking about, what is your daily schedule? Is your child someone like me that needs a timer? It's very important for me to keep track of how much time I'm spending on particular assignments, because I can sit for 5 hours and work on one thing. And that's probably not the most productive use of my time. So it's important for me to keep track of how long, A, it's taken me to complete certain tasks, and B, how much time I really should be spending on certain tasks. So my daughter and I have talked about, how do we keep track of time? Some kids don't like beepers and times, you know, dings going off on their phone. That's distracting, and it's also distracting to me. So we have like a really old, I should have brought it out here, old school timer that you, sand timer that you just turn upside down, and it runs out in 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, that gives her a sense of, okay, it took me this long to work on my math problems or my writing assignment or to read a book. And that way she can keep track of time that doesn't feel evasive. Sensory break materials are super important, particularly for our young learners, and specifically if they're sitting in front of a screen, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. So if you have some, you know, some rice that you can put in a sock or a balloon so that they can squeeze it, or putty, or rubber bands, or fidget spinners, something that gives them some kind of sensory, so that as they're sitting, they're not just kind of sitting and, you know, having all of this unproductive energy, that there's something that they can do to kind of fidget and move around. So some things about organization that I would recommend, particularly if you are trying to balance working from home, which I am doing right now, is snack bags, making bags, checklists, and calendars. So snack bags, if I'm on a call, there are bags of snacks in the refrigerator. So right now on Zoom, if she is hungry and needs something, there are some little baggies with snacks up in the refrigerator that she can go and get, which means she won't come over and say, Mom, I need some food. There's also making bags. So there's some things with crayons, markers, felt paper, colored pencils. She can just grab one of those and go draw and play and make some things. So when we're trying to balance all of this stuff, how do we sit here and do this work that we're doing right now when our kids are constantly meeting us? So a couple of things that we've done is that I've created a weekly kind of planning station. This is just the wall in my apartment. So she could see at a week at a glance everything that she needs to do. If she has questions, she can write on there. If there's things that we have to print out, we have a little cork board. This calendar here, this is literally my calendar from August. I put all of the things that I have going on, and I try to put the time so that she has a sense of what's going on in mom's life. So this is sort of my calendar. This is her calendar. We also decided that if I am in a room and I'm on a Zoom call, she needs a warning so she just doesn't burst in, and I need a warning when she's in there. So we have a little sign that says Zoom in session, quiet please. So it's like all these little bitty things that we can do as we think about what we need as learners that help give signals to each other so that we can work together in our communities with our kids. The other thing that I would recommend are protocols. What should I do when? So this is what I had to make for my daughter so that we were really clear about what happens if mom is on the Zoom call. So first, is it an emergency? Meaning, are you bleeding and can you breathe? If you are not bleeding and you can breathe, then you're fine, right? If you need me, you can stop me. If you're hungry, get a snack bag. If you're bored, here's some things to do. If you need help, she knows to get a little sticky note and put it on the back of my computer. The reason why I'm specific about that is so it doesn't mean she comes in front of me and sort of interrupts me. I know she has a sticky note. She's going to put it on the back of the computer. I'll look at it and see what I need to do. So these are just recommendations and tips I have as we are all trying to figure this out. These aren't fail-proof at all, but as March has kind of rolled now into August, these are all the things that I've had to do as a parent and a working parent to make this time work. Some resources that I'll share, and I'll post them in the chat so that you have access to them. New York State has a really nice parenting guide that I would recommend looking at, and these are all in English and they are all US based, but there may be similar recommendation guides, you know, from where you're tuning in from. The Washington Post has had a couple of articles about parenting during COVID that I'd also suggest that you look at. And then the Child Mind Institute has some resources as well. So I'll stop there, and I thank you for your time and your attention. If you have any questions, I look forward to engaging with you later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What really stood out to me was the level of clarity that you've developed in the home. And you know, a few months ago, everyone was thrown into the state of emergency. Roles were changed around. Everything was flipped upside down. But we've had a few months now to really, you know, sink into this and really think through and become very intentional. Who do we want to be during this time? What kind of learning is going to happen? What kind of teaching is going to happen? And I really appreciated the sense of intention around everything, you know, communicating very clearly with the school. What is my role in this moment? What is expected of me? And then also in the home. So that level of clarity of communication going within the home and then from the home to the outside world, whether it's the school or the community boards, depending on the setting we're in. And I appreciated the sense of structure. We all know that children really thrive when there's a sense of structure, but adults do too. It's not just children. We're all children in that regard, in that knowing what to do, what's expected of me. And that's both in a broader sense of, you know, what does it mean for me to be a parent who's educating a child at home during COVID? But also I love the really specific logistical things of where to put the Post-it, where to find food, because our lives are often made up of many of these small moments. And at the end of 20 of those small moments, you have a day. So really appreciate both allowing us to really think about what it means to redefine and reimagine what education could be, but also the really practical tips for day to day so that we're not so burnt out by the end of the day. We don't have time to think of this beautiful, big reimagination of what education can be. So thank you, Dr. Price-Dennis. I appreciate that. We're now going to go on to our next speaker, who's also going to really help us think about what it means for parents and community boards of education to really work together. And our next speaker is Mr. Eskimo Kobia, and he's an official at the Kenya National Association of Parents in Nakuru County. And the Kenya National Association of Parents, it's a civil society organization in the education sector in Kenya and has been in existence since 1999. An association serves to bring together the Parents Association and the management boards of school in Kenya to participate actively in all matters touching on education, health, and safety of Kenyan education. Kenyan children. And I'm really excited because you've been doing this work now for a while of thinking about how do parents really communicate with the school board. So this is just, we're all really excited to learn from you as we're all looking forward to this all over the world now. Thank you, Mr. Kobia.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share about the Parents Association. We are the umbrella body in the whole country, and I'm supposed to address the issues which are mostly challenges that the parents are facing, like teachers. The first one, I think, as we have been going around during the elections in the whole country, I've interacted with all the counties and the challenges and the education level that the parents they have. The COVID-19, whereby most of the parents in Kenya, they're absentee parents because of the nature of the job that they do. So when we talk about the parents being a teacher, it becomes a bit difficulty because in our African culture, most of the parents, they like their children so much. So when you say a parent being a teacher, it becomes a challenge because even when that child makes a mistake in the house, sometimes it becomes a difficulty. You see the two parents, one delegating to the other one telling, can you punish that child? The other one saying no. So it is very hard for the parents in Kenya at this level to be a teacher of the child. One, because of the education level and the structures put aside by the government. It might have been, maybe we have been colonized in such a way that we always think about the teacher who has gone for training is only the person who can be able to deliver the information to the child. Like now, even in our own houses, most of the introduction of the talents in the schools, whereby now we have CBC where we are supposed to identify the talents from the grassroots of the child. So it is state and the environment that we are staying as parents, we differ from different parents. We have urban settings and we have rural settings. Even doesn't have a smartphone, and then you tell that parents, I want you to teach your child. Even himself or herself, she has never seen that phone, that the smartphone we are talking about. Then internet coverage in Kenya. Not all the areas have the internet. So it looks very a bit difficult for most of the parents, like in Turkana areas, or where I've gone to do the lecture, like Tana River. You meet the parents, they have never received electricity, like areas like Lam. And now we want our child to be the same, the one who is in Nairobi. Then we have Havani and also the people who live in the slum, like Kibera. It is very hard also, those people to understand when you are talking about digitizing the education or teaching his own child, and when he cannot be able to reach that one, his work is to go and look for something to eat and then make a day. So we have seen a lot of parents even sacrificing themselves to sell their own children so that they can be able to get the food. How do you now go and teach a child who is now and not able to be able to get the food? Another issue is about now disability. Our parents have done elections in where we have people with persons with disability. How do we address these issues? Come our parents. Parents is not a disability, but he has a child with a disability. So it becomes very difficult because he has not gone to that school where he can be able to speak in science and other areas. So the parents in that area cannot be able to be a teacher because we have the training colleges, which trains those ones. But now when it comes to the parents, it's very difficult. So that one becomes a very difficult situation to most of the parents in both the areas because we are not talented in all areas. Then we have professionalism. We have parents who have gone to school and the others, they have not gone to school. How do you tell a teacher who has maybe a parent who is a university graduate or as a Form 4 and he has never gone to class? No, you tell him to show a standard 8 mathematics and he left in for a standard 1. So it becomes a very difficult situation on the ground. But in the reality, to have them in one place, it becomes very difficult because the government itself has not brought the resources on the ground and then the infrastructures. So when I'm speaking about the parents, I'm speaking on behalf of all the parents of the Kenya and where I've visited most of the counties and the challenges that I've seen, even before, even after, before Corona and even after Corona. So what we need to do as government, how do we make sure the parents are aware that in the case that thing happens again, how do we address this issue? Like now we have them, we are talking about them, teenage pregnancies, because most of them, they are idle and the parents are not to monitor them. Even that teaching is it's difficult. And the people who have the internet and the Wi-Fi in their houses, including those who are civilized, they have no time to monitor what their children are doing. So we need to set a system where we can have even the control of parents for their children when it comes to access to some information, so that we can now talk about the parents becoming a teacher. We know the parents is the first teacher for the child, but now, for now, when it comes to this during hard time of COVID-19, it is giving us a lot of index come up, and now we are requesting, as we go on in discussing this issue, let's talk about the resources. Let's talk about how do we mobilize now the parents, and then synthesize about how they can be able to handle their children when it comes to education. Then people with disability, most of them, they have complained that when we are talking about the education, we don't associate with them with education. Why? Because we sideline them, we think there you get so shocked that child cannot understand anything. But that child doesn't has nobody to handle that issue. So it becomes an issue in the country for the disability schools to be equipped, and also to be given teachers who can be able to handle, and also the parents who have those people with disability can be able to be educational synthesized on how to handle that issue. Developed countries, maybe they have their own culture. You know, to change a culture, it takes time. So we cannot jump just, we want A, B, C, D. Like now we have tried as parents, September to January, none of the students or any pupil touching the book up to now. I'm assuring you, including in my own house, they left the book and they went and put them in the stores, waiting for the last day, maybe in December, knowing that the schools are going to be open. So parents, when we persuade them, can you read? Can you read? If we tell them to read, what is your level of education? If the child tells you, bring my certificate, some of them, they go ahead of asking you, you got a he in mathematics. Now you want a child who is now in Form 4 to get a he. When he asks you, when did you get my mom? You start now signing off as a parent. So it becomes a challenge to us when it comes to addressing about the education. Then when it comes to absenteeism of the parents, they are single mothers, they are single fathers. And then we have absentee father due to the job or where they are working. Some are maybe in the government institution, they cannot be able to go to at home at the right time to see what their children are doing. So it becomes very difficult for that child, even the father, to know. Like now during this COVID time, it is the time you have realized your child has this problem. Either he is taking drug or he is doing wrong. But before, most of the men are always outside. So on the request, the parents who are now absentee fathers, when they're in the house, let them monitor what their children are doing, whether it is the homework. Some of them, they have never even attempted to see the book, since maybe they completed the education. So as parents, we are supposed to look into issues of our children, which we ourselves, we cannot be able to address. So we need a lot of education. We need to do a lot of homework when it comes to parents as a teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kobia. You gave us a lot to think about in just a short amount of time. I want to highlight a couple of the points you brought up, because I think this is true across different countries. The idea that parents are not a monolithic group. You know, we talk about parents as educators as if this means one thing, but you know, parents have different levels of education. Parents have different levels of patience when it comes to teaching. Some parents are still working full-time outside the home. Some parents are working full-time inside the home. So when we talk about what it means for parents to be educators, we need to really highlight the fact that in every home, this means something very different. And even with parents who have 3 children at home, that might mean 3 different things depending on who that child is. And you've also highlighted the idea that there have always been inequities in our educational systems wherever we are in the world. And COVID-19 has really amplified that. We really see that kids with disabilities who, you know, receive special services at school, how they're impacted, and the fact that parents aren't always taught what to do. in these situations. You know, in the context I am here, we have a lot of immigrant families who do not speak English, and now they're suddenly being asked to help students in education in a language they don't speak. So how do we support our parents? So connecting with Dietrich's point about using this opportunity as a way to reimagine what we mean by education, really have a clear view of what's going on in our schools. And now that these issues are amplified, we know we will go back to school at some point, hopefully soon. But how do we go back as different in what we do? How do we, with the knowledge we have now about these inequities and different levels, how do we take that information and create school systems that allow for more evening out of this? We know that education has traditionally been a local thing, and parents and the village in which you lived in worked together. But now that education comes down from the state level or national level, it isn't always what parents understand. And even if parents went to school 20 years ago, 30 years ago, our techniques are different, pedagogies are different. So how do we really use this opportunity for a much stronger communication and a bringing together of the home, education in the home with education in the school and for the larger community? So thank you, Mr. Kobia. Really appreciate all your points here. Thank you. We're going to go on to our next speaker, and this is Mary Maruki, and she's a pioneer home educator in Kenya with 22 years of experience. She's the founder and director of Elimu Inyumbani, an organization that provides tutoring services, consultancy, and training to parents and teachers in home education. She's also the East Africa Regional Representative of Canberra Learn, and is the founding member of EACH, which stands for East Africa Christian Home Educators. And in response to the current school crisis, she launched a free e-magazine to educate parents on successful homeschooling. So Mary, we're really going to be looking to you because this is really your area. You've been working on this combination of parents as educators in the home with a curriculum, not just in the moments of emergency. So I feel like you're going to be able to help us step back and really look at what this could mean. I want to remind all of you all, because we have so many amazing speakers, to ask questions so that our speakers can get back to. So if you hover near the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a box that says Q&A. And if you click on there, you can post your questions, and that way we'll make sure we'll see them and get them to our speakers. So Mary, we're ready to learn from you and your 22 years of magic you've been creating.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity to share. Just like you said, this is what I do on a daily basis, and I've been doing for 22 years. It's interesting that the world has come to this point where we're all looking to find a way for all of us to work better with our children, and you know, in combination with education. Okay, I want to mostly kind of address what I wanted to say, but with the examples, especially what Mr. Kobia said, and some of what Dietrich said. Today, I really wanted to kind of explain what I have been experiencing with parents as I help them cope with this whole responsibility. The most important thing and the main thing that I've been having to share with parents is a paradigm shift in thinking on what is education. Because parents are trying to duplicate what's been going on in school at home, and it's just not working. And so I keep telling them that is not the way to be able to, it's not going to be able to work. It's only going to work if you change your mindset on what is education. So I've been having to educate parents that education is a lot more than what is usually done in a school setting. And it involves the whole child. And the whole child, yes, we have the mind, the academic part, which is mental, but we also have the physical part, we have the emotional, we have the social, and we have the spiritual. And so I've been talking to most parents about, you may not be able to do maybe the academic part, but you can certainly do all the other parts, which is part of education. And so I've been having to explain to them, give them ideas on what they can do. Okay, most of the parents I work with are literate, they've been to school, a lot of them have degrees, some of them at least up to the college level. I work with mostly parents at that level. But even with parents who don't have that level of education, I keep sharing them that they can. All parents know how to cook. You cook every day in your home. You know, you cook a balanced diet. Most parents earn a living doing something, some kind of skill. You may be a carpenter, you may be a basket weaver, you may be a teacher, you may be a marketer. There is something in your profession that you can share with your child. You may be an accountant, so there's a portion of knowledge that you have that you can transfer to your child. And so that would be a life skill, that would be a career, exposure to future careers for your child. That would be a different aspect of knowledge that they didn't have in terms of practical, knowing how it's practically done. They may have heard about it theoretically in school, but maybe they haven't have a chance to actually do it. So if we look at education holistically, in a more holistic approach, then we'll be able to cope with COVID-19, especially in Kenya, in our setting in Africa. Just like Mr. Kovia said, we have all been, I would say, brainwashed into thinking that education can only be delivered in a school setting. And so that's why we're having a problem. But I don't have a degree, but I don't have a teaching certificate, but I don't have qualifications. I don't have the government qualification. So now that is where the problem is. So if our minds change and we understand that education is broader than that, and that is only one aspect of it, then we'll be able to relax and be able to see, okay, what can I do? Just like Ditra said, what do I have in my home that is a resource? And so once parents begin to understand the scope of education, they begin to see the resources in their home. They see the kitchen as a resource. They see their work as a resource. They see the newspaper as a resource. And again, the other problem we're having now is that everyone is thinking that, just like Ditra said, that we all have to go online to be able to educate our children. And then they say, I don't have a gadget, I don't have internet, I don't have connectivity. And so we are having to also explain that it's not about online, it's about remote learning. And remote learning is what we are doing with schools. But even at home, even if you don't have any school material, you can still teach your child, which is called homeschooling, which is what I explained to them now. This is homeschooling. Homeschooling does not necessarily involve anything remote or anything online or anything from any institution. You can recreate a whole education system in your home. Just like Ditra was saying, she has a system. She has a system of getting food. She has a system of when you're bored, do this. She has a system of, she has a schedule where her child is able to see what she's doing and what a child should be doing, and when they can have time together and when they have to respect each other's time. And so things like, simple things like that can work. Just even having a schedule like that. The other thing I normally share with parents is a timetable. Because parents will be like, okay, so what do I do with this child? Because for example, in school, they're occupied doing academics all day. The child leaves home early and comes home in the evening. In Kenya, our school hours are very long. And so the parent is thinking about an academic schedule that's a full day long. And I tell them, no, you don't need to be doing academics all day. Just have maybe 2-3 hours in the morning that you're doing your math and your English and whatever books that you have, resources that you have, you're covering. And the rest of the time, spend time teaching your child about the world around them, skills, life skills, involve them in your work. So if you have a shop, for example, many people in Kenya have shops. Take your child to the shop and let them help you with the stock taking, with giving change to the client, customer service, getting supplies. Your child is learning a whole lot of different things just being in that shop and seeing how economics works and how mommy brings home or dad brings bread home. This is how they get this money, because children don't know how you get money. You just see you coming home with money and they buy things. But how do I get money? I have to get money by selling, and I buy it at this much and sell it at this much, and then I'm left with this much, and that's what I'm able to bring home. And the child is like, oh, okay. And you know, a lot of these things they are learning in school, but they're not applying them. They don't really know how to apply what they're learning in school with what is going on in real life. So just like Ditra said, this is your opportunity to show your child how real life works. And that is education. And that is eventually where they're going anyway. After they graduate, they're going back to the real world, or they're going to actually try to apply what they learned in school. And so this is your chance to actually help your child apply all the things they're learning. You could be having a business. A lot of women have businesses in the market. They sell vegetables, or they cook food for, let's say, construction workers, or they have a restaurant. You know, all that again is a business that your child can learn how to run. And so the problem we have again with parents is that, like Mr. Kobia said, because we have separated the concept of education with parenting, the parent says, I have to leave this child at home. I can't go with them where I'm going because I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher. I can't teach. I can't help them with education. I can't go with them. But you're a teacher. You can go with your child wherever you're going. You don't have to leave them at home to be exposed to unwanted things, or to be bored, or to end up in trouble because they have all this idle time. Parents have not thought of going with their children where they're going to work, or because most people have a business in Kenya. Most people are self-employed, and so it's very few people who actually have a formal job where it may not be the best environment to take your child. And then a lot of people have transitioned from going every day to work. A lot of people have transitioned to transferring their work to home, or changing their actual work. For example, we have taxi drivers who are no longer doing the taxi business, but they've converted their cars to a marketplace. And so they all park on the side of the road, and they sell vegetables at the booths of their cars. Your child can be in the car selling the vegetables with you as you dash off and do something else. And so you may not have been able to drive with your child in the back of the seat, but you can now sell with your child at the back of the seat, for example. So we've had a lot of people changing their jobs and their ways of earning a living, and we've not had them think how they can incorporate their children in that. And so redefining how we are supposed to be learning is really the big solution right now, and the way to cope with COVID-19. Redefining the way things have been. Because if we maintain the way things have been, we're not going to be able to cope. But if we redefine it, then we are going to be able to cope. There's a lot of strategies that are available for us as parents. So the main thing, like I said, is just the paradigm shift in the mind, in understanding, and then creating an opportunity where you're feeding on, you're educating the other aspects of the child. You could even be just decide you're going to educate your child on spiritual matters. You don't need the church pastor. You don't need anyone else but yourself to open the Bible and share with your child, or whatever your belief is. And because you've probably been wanting to transfer that knowledge to your child before, but you never had time because of school, maybe take that time and say, okay, this is the only education I can provide at the moment, spiritual nourishment. Or life skills. I can teach you how I wash clothes, how we hang them, how we iron them, how we pack them, how we put them all in the right places. I can teach you how we shop, so you can go shop. Like even I shared this last time. The parents in the rural areas have so much going on economically, and they actually have been doing a better job at incorporating their children, because they have been actually involving their children in their farming businesses, in their animal husbandry businesses. But in the urban setting, we've been having maintained that issue of, I'm not a teacher and I can't do this. And so, yeah, so basically that's the main thing I wanted to share. But I also want to share that some of the parents who are able to do online are transferring from what the school has been doing, what the solution the school has been having in terms of online, to Cambryland. Cambryland is one of the systems that has been created for self-directed learning. We're learning at your own pace, and more or less for a lay person, any lay person can guide the child to be able to learn. And so we've been having many parents transition from what the school is offering as an online solution to a more self-directed online solution, because they've realized they want that flexibility. They realize that if they can do it without having to know the content. A parent can guide their child on an online program without having to know the content. And you can also make a schedule that's flexible for you, because what's been offered in school still has a fixed schedule. The school is still running the fixed schedule. The school is still expecting the teacher to deliver all the content. And they're also they're not flexible. They have certain days of the week where they're doing it and other days they're not. So you have to limit yourself to at that particular timing. So a lot of changes are happening, even with the online schools that are being offered. People are changing to a more self-directed and homeschool system. The other thing that I have been doing, which is helping parents to cope with, is the online magazine that I have been writing. Right now, I'm on the 4th edition, which I just released last week. And it has tips and ideas and even whatever I shared in that magazine on the difference between just education and homeschooling and holistic education. I've been describing those things and helping parents to kind of change their mindset on what they're supposed to be doing at this time. So if any of the parents here or in your networks, like Mr. Kobe and your network, if you want to access the free magazines, you can, because they're really educating parents on the practical ways of being able to actually cope with your education your child at this time. And so the solution is not so much what the government will do, but what each household can do to be able to educate their own child. And so in Kenya, that's really the main thing that we're having to do here, just explaining to everyone that the solution is within you. It's actually there and you can actually do it. Yeah, I think my time is up.
All right, thank you, Mary. And Mary, we do have a lot of questions that are coming in for you. So when we get to the Q&A, we're going to put you on the spot once again. And I really appreciate your invitation for us to, similar to what Deetra said, redefine what we mean by education. So I know in our US context here that, the best schools, the most progressive schools are actually doing this now. They're not just sitting there preparing for an exam all day. They're out in the community. They are doing internships, hands-on. And what you're describing of a kid helping their parents sell vegetables in the market, that is an internship of sorts. You're learning on-the-job skills. So these are things that our most prestigious schools, in, at least in the United States, that's what they're doing, is these hands-on skills. They're thinking about the spiritual aspect of the child, the social. So you're helping us see education as not just schooling. Schooling is one part of a larger education. And I really appreciate, because my doctoral research work is how kids learn in the community itself, not just home, not just school, but out and about, mixing with their larger community. So I also really appreciate that you give us a lot of practical tips on things to do within the home, things for kids to do with parents to learn. Math can be learned on a worksheet. Math can be learned buying and selling things in a store, creating a budget for a family. So really thinking about the bigger picture and the deeper picture and who we want to come out of this emergency as, how we want to be as a family, how we want to be as a country, as a continent, as a world, but also what does that mean in my everyday life? Like, these are really nice ideas. What do I do today when my child is screaming, and how do I get them online? So we'll have a lot more questions for you on some of the balancing of these, bigger ideals of shifting education. And what does that mean when a child has an upcoming test that determines their future and what university they can attend? So all of the speakers, keep those questions in mind as we shift to our next speaker. All right, and our final speaker for today, I'm really excited. Okay, there she is. Just wanted to make sure we're all here, is Esther Gacicio. And she's an EdTech consultant and the co-founder of eLearning Solutions, a company leveraging digital technology to design, deliver, and deploy learning and training solutions across the spectrum to youth, institutions, and corporate world. And she's a former and long-serving employee of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, where she rose through the ranks to senior assistant director specializing in education technology. She's an accomplished e-learning specialist, instructional and curriculum designer, trainer, and facilitator with experience spanning over 25 years. And she also has a deep passion for digital literary systems and their impact in education, and also for building capacity. She was involved in the development of the competency-based curriculum and also served as a member of Secretariat for the Task Force on Enhancing Access, Relevance, Transition, Equity, and Quality for Effective Curriculum Reforms and Implementation of the CBC. She has numerous awards for excellence in learning. She was a finalist for the Africa Prize for Engineering Innovation. multiple degrees. And on top of that, what really stands out when I read Esther's bio is the deep passion and commitment she has for both excellence and equity coming together, not forsaking one for the other, but for really understanding how we can fit these things together. And Esther, you've been an expert in this space, in the actual curriculum design, which we have a few questions coming in on that point of how do we actually design curriculum? How do we follow curriculum in that area? And you've been focusing on that with the digital technology before it was popular, before COVID. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you today. And I know all our audience, especially those asking questions, are thrilled at what you'll be sharing with us. So I'm going to summarize a couple of the questions together. You know, we're talking in this big picture of, you know, what does homeschooling mean? What does education mean? How do you what advice do you have for parents who have this reality of exams that are very important for their children's future, for college entrance, for promotion to the next grade? What advice do you have for these families in that preparation when they can't just focus on things that are social, they can't just focus on, you know, hands-on activities? There's the reality of these exams, you know, I don't want to say looming, but right here for families. What advice do you have for them? So anyone who wants to start with that?
I think you can start with that. Being a parent, I think there's something that I've been advising parents wherever I go for a meeting. Education is not preparation, it is life. So anybody who thinks about COVID and there's no education, I used to tell them there's a future which is a child is supposed to live on. Because an educated country, you cannot move anywhere. Like now we are even requesting people are preparing the curriculum to make sure the child starts about the teachers from the grassroots. The way you are saying, let's train them on what we do. I do a security job, and that's what I usually tell my child, this is where I get money. But there are some jobs that you can do, you cannot introduce to your child. If you are thief, you cannot tell your child to go and steal. So what we are telling parents is only to make sure, as they talk about education, whether you are going to school or not, make sure you encourage your child after the COVID, because we don't know how long it will take. Thank you.
I would also like to share something. I would also like to say that, and that's the point that I was sharing before, we should not focus so much on the academics, even if the child is going to do an exam. Right now in Kenya, the exams have been cancelled indefinitely. So we should not still be on the exam mindset that we are preparing for exams, because nobody knows when those exams are. So the best thing would be to have that child be occupied doing something else that they've not had a chance to do. And then when they announce that the exams are on, then pick that back up and focus. But right now, if you still maintain the exam is looming and nobody knows whether the exam is next year, you're actually wasting precious time right now, not teaching your child something else that would be helpful in life in the future. Especially if these are exams that have to do with moving to higher education, you should be discussing career options, exposing your child to different career opportunities, and having your child refine further and further what they want to be when they finish. And that would be a better use of time than keeping on looking at how your child can continue studying for an exam that nobody knows when it will be. And so I would say, change your mindset on, get your mind off academics and think of something that is useful for a future that the child will still retain and get the skill now, and then pick up the exam issue and the academic issue later.
Yeah, Mary, I agree with that a lot. I think this notion of having one single metric that is narrowly defined of what's considered success isn't helpful for our children at all, whether pre or post-COVID. It's never been a helpful measurement of how students learn and if they are able to learn and process and make sense of information. So a couple things I would also recommend on top of that is getting a sense of what the exam is trying to identify as a skill set, and then looking at what those particular indicators or skill sets are and how they may map onto the things that you're already doing with your child around finance, around language, around writing. Oftentimes, some of those same skill sets that tests or exams are looking to measure in children have exposure to in their daily lives. So if you're already doing wordplay and having conversations and telling stories or reading stories and synthesizing information and analyzing information, those are skill sets that should transfer to things that are being measured on exams, because that's what exams or psychometricians are trying to measure with children in curriculum. So I would say that most of the things that you're doing, just getting a sense of how those map onto the same skill sets in an exam would be helpful and allow you to know that you might be addressing them anyway, even though that might not be your focus. And I'd also really, I'm doing this as a parent as well, strongly urge you to contact whoever is in charge of the exam. So whether it's your state, local government, whoever has say over those exams, school boards or whatever, to talk about postponing them. So many of the exams in the United States were canceled in the spring. And my assumption is because a lot of us as parents are pushing to cancel them again, they won't happen this year either. So I think those are things that parents can do. You can have a grassroots movement to change that culture. So thank you.
Thank you all. And I love the idea of, reimagining a world afterwards where we don't have these exams. I'm from Egypt originally. We have the saying that high school exit exam that determines, this one test determines what you can do in college and therefore after, that we come out of this rethinking the importance of these exams, or rethinking one test or a test to determine the future of our precious children and all the talents they have. But in the meantime, I really appreciate the idea of connecting things to everyday life and really not hyper focusing on this one thing, or just understanding we're not in a normal state right now. Things are not normal, and trying to maintain this rigid hold on what we've always known is going to make us go backwards and hold us still, as opposed to imagining, here's where we are now, what can we do with what we have, and how do we use this moment to reimagine going into the future. We do have a few more questions, and we'll give Esther a couple of minutes to get, going from older kids and the big exams and higher education, we have a couple of questions about younger kids. It seems this toll has been taken of COVID, and online learning and remote learning has been a lot tougher for some families on the youngest children, who maybe are not going to sit still by themselves for half an hour because that's not what's developmentally appropriate. So we would love some ideas from all of you, from your different perspectives, on how to support families who have the little ones at home who want attention and are excited and want to move a lot. Anyone wants to start? Mary?
Yeah, I can share that. With the little ones, usually it's very similar to what I shared before. They're mostly looking to know about the world around them. They're curious about what you're doing. They follow you around. They'll follow you if you're in the garden, they follow you in the kitchen, they follow you in your washing. And so those are opportunities to just teach them. They like to copy. They like to do what you're doing. And so it's a chance to model and teach them things. For example, you could be cooking and then you can just name the food that you're cooking. This is a banana, this is an apple, this is an onion. You do this first, for them just to learn. And they'll repeat after you. They'll be like, okay, onion. When they see that, they'll say onion. If you go out to the garden, you can point to the different plants that there are. And they'll start pointing at them and naming the plants as well. You share about soil, you can share them with them about the stars. You can go outside and share and point to the stars and call those stars. With young children, it's even easier than the older ones, because you really don't have to follow a curriculum. And usually at that young age, the most important thing they do when they go to school is learn to read. And so you could be reading to them. You can get a bunch of books and be reading to them. Just the same, even the same books all over again. I mean, over and over, because they love to read something familiar. They love to hear the same story over and over, young children. And so you could get some books and be reading to them. Let them, even if it's just 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just have a schedule where you have a particular time when you read to them, or when the particular time when they're focused, when they ask, can you read to me? And so have something like that, like reading to them. have them follow you around. Get some papers for them to cut with scissors. Get them to draw. There's a lot of coloring books in the shops. That buy coloring books and let them color. There's a lot of apps and even on TV, some educational programs where they're learning how to sing the ABCs, learning how to sing numbers. You so play some music for them to sing and dance at the same time, learn something. With young children, it's usually very easy. If you get your mind off school and curriculum and programs, you can actually teach your children with everyday things. You can name the colors of all the furniture in the house, and they get to know all the colors just by pointing at pillows and curtains and carpets and things around them, clothes. You can teach them a lot. You can teach them numbers, colors, shapes, sizes, plants, non-plant, living things, non-living things. Basically about family. You can teach them so much, and all that is what they learn in school, but they learn through books. They draw pictures of family and point at the family, but you're in your own family and you can point at the real person. You can point at grandma and say, this is grandma, and you can point at the uncle and say, this uncle is sort of a book, So for young children, it's a lot easier but you have to change your mind. You have to just change your understanding of how education is delivered and how you can just use what's around you. Your eyes need to open more and to see I have resources around me a lot more. But that's what I do. I train parents on how to identify what they have and what they don't have and what they can use. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mary. I love those ideas of using what you have and what you don't have. And I'm going to share screen real quick just to show you a picture. I was reading a book with my daughter, and we talked about this scene from the book, and so she decided she wanted to make the little girl's room. So this is my Amazon box that she has cut up, as Mary has said, got the scissors, she's got a glue gun right over there, she built a loft. So this took her about an hour, right, to do, and that's just the materials that she had in her house. So we've been using her dolls, her Black Panther figures to put on plays after we read a book. So we read a book and then she can put on a play using the doll. So we have it, that's not digital, that's very analog, but it's very material based. So if your children have toys, anything like that can be a source of, play. You can create your own theater. They can design clothes for those dolls. So you're getting into cutting and measuring. We've been doing a lot of baking. So there's just so many things that we do every single day that I haven't wrote down as a curriculum. But if I asked her to think about how do you know the difference between 4 and 6 ounces, what does that look like in metric, what does that look like in US Customs, she knows that. There's no exam for it, but she's been living it and doing it and thinking about it every day. And so I wanted to agree with you and to show you an example of what that actually looks like when I'm on a Zoom call. That's one of the things that she did one time.
I think, Mary, I would like to know about the people with disability, because nobody is addressing even those small children. How have you been handling? Have you been handling only the parents in urban areas? Because whenever you are speaking with disability, we are living with them and they are part of our families.
Okay, I missed part of your question, but I think I've understood what you're asking. Yes, I have been working mostly with parents who are in the urban areas, but I do have some in rural areas, and I do have special needs parents. Special needs children need parents need an extra person to help, like person dedicated to work to help him with the child. That's what we do most of the time. Like it could be a relative who has a heart for the child and who's ready to work with the child in terms of, and most of the time it's basic things like feeding them, taking them for a walk, reading to them, the basic like kindergarten content or primary content. Most special needs children don't go to very high levels. And so usually they need a dedicated person to work with them. If it's not the parent, if the parents are working, then the parents usually have to find someone else. Like in the urban setting, they hire special needs teachers, or they get a relative to come stay with them who they can train on what to do with the child. Bathe them, dress them up, feed them, take them for a walk, sing with them, basic things. So Usually for special needs, you need some kind of specialized a guidance. Like you need what do you call it, a guardian. You need a guardian. If it's not the parent, it's someone else. But in terms of activities, you do very similar activities with young children, because it's still the everyday life skills that you're doing. You're trying to get them independent, like to dress independently, or to go to the toilet independently, or to walk independently, or or to talk some words, to say hello. So usually it's not very difficult things, but they need someone dedicated to them. And so in the rural setting, you have a lot of extended family. You know, in the African society, we have so much family around us, especially in the rural areas. So you basically can get a community, some kind of arrangement with the community to work with special needs children. Maybe have a few people dedicate themselves to a group of them, or have each family identify one who comes to their home or lives with them and remains that person who's mentoring and guiding that child. So maybe Mr. Kobia, I don't know if that is an answer to some of the special needs cases, you know, but I think you would agree with me that in the rural setting is a lot of human resource lying idle. And if people can be trained and their eyes open to what they can do, I think they can come together and create something. Because again, a lot of parents are absent, like you said, they have to go to work. And so parents usually have to form little support groups for each other. If I have a young child and I have to work, I create a support group. There's a mom who I can leave the child with, who has a young child in her home who takes care of the two children instead of one. And so you could do that with the special needs. You can do that with young children. You can do that with any level of children. Community, small groups of people working together as a community can work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing you've all highlighted is this need for us as families, as community members, to take back our confidence in who we are as educators. And I think whether it's a colonial system in terms of, you know, historical, or whether it's socioeconomic colonialism, as we have here in the US, a lot of families have been, you know, taught to think they don't know how to teach, right? It's, I don't have this specific certificate, I didn't have this training, that we forget how much knowledge and power and education actually resides within the home. And how do we start using that to leverage, you know, how do we teach plants, right? Not from a book, but from actually going to touch the plants. How do we teach community engagement? But how do we also keep in mind our kids who are on the edges of the system? Kids who are immigrants, kids who don't speak the native language of that country, kids who have a disability and the parents have not been taught by the school ways to access, you know, sensory learning, or how to have, you know, support in learning to read. So maintaining this confidence in ourselves as educators, as parents, of I do know a lot, I have a lot of knowledge, and I have a lot of ways of teaching, but also really keep in mind our children on the edges of education, and how do we work together as a community to support this child and the family with this child. So I really appreciate all three of you really reminding us of that power within our communities if we work together and remember every child. Before Esther starts, we do have a lot of questions we haven't gotten to, and I know we're already at time. So we're going to copy these questions and put them together, and then I will speak with Pauline about how we can get some of these answers out to all of you, because a lot of them are really fascinating. And who knows, maybe Esther will answer all of them in her presentation. No pressure, Esther. But we'll get that going. All right, so without further ado, Esther, we're really excited to hear what you have to say, and we have a lot of questions about curriculum, so really excited for your perspective.
Thank you very much, and so sorry for what has happened. Technology has a way of failing you when you think you have it right, and takes you in rounds and rounds, and eventually makes you get confused where you were. Anyway, I want to delve into this discussion. Most of it has been discussed by Kobia and by Maruki, Mary, on the issues of how a parent how parents can step in during this process and during these times. And of course, Prof had earlier on talked into this matter and given a lot of information about it. So I'll try and run through what I had in mind. Most of it has been covered by the previous presenters. And I'll just try and probably loop in a bit of curriculum as well into what it is that we expect at this point in time. We are all in a new normal, as we all know, and definitely with the new normal, we have to definitely change the way we do things, the way we approach stuff. And even we as curriculum developers and teachers also have to fit in with this new normal. And one of the things I know it has done, it has taken us back to the basics. Back to the basics in the terms that what we used to do when we were growing up, how we learned when we were growing up under the hands of our parents is actually what is happening as we speak. During those days, we went to school, closed school, went home. When we went home, we were under our parents, and learning did not stop when we were under our parents. And that is why during those times, we became very good cooks because we had to cook. We learned how to farm. We learned how to wash our clothes, things that are not happening at this point in time. Why? Because as we continue to grow, and especially in urban centers, we delved or moved away from what we knew when we grew up, and probably trying to baby our children more. And in doing that, we've actually lost them and lost the way things were done. So this new normal has actually taken us back to the basics. So we need to go back to the basics as parents, back to the basics as teachers. Teachers never spoon-fed us during those times. But now, we find that we are all drilling our children for the purposes of passing exams, for the purposes of getting those white-collar jobs. And when they get out there, they are not able to perform in any way. So we need to redefine ourselves again and go back to where we were. Let's go back to where the rain began to beat us. And COVID has made us do that. So first and foremost, as a parent, we need to know that and appreciate the fact that we are not professionals. We are not teachers. We are not trained. We don't have the certificate, but we still have our role to play. As a teacher, the first teacher, before you take your children to the school, the first teacher is a parent. And therefore we need to play our role as the teachers that we were meant to be and guide our kids into which ways that they're supposed to be. Secondly, as parents, we are supposed to be empathetic with our children. We should get rid of the anxious helpfulness that we have. And that's what I was talking about. We baby our children too much. We try to assist them. They're given homework, you do the homework for them. So as parents, let's go back there and let the kids do it by themselves. So as parents, we need to understand the differences. As somebody mentioned earlier on, when you have 3 kids, you're 3 different parents. So we need to understand our children and their different learning styles. That is not the work of the teacher. It is our work as parents to understand the learning styles of our children and support them. The new curriculum right now has brought in competency-based curriculum, which is more of child-centered, where we are looking at children and learners are being co-creators of knowledge, so that they don't depend on the teacher to help them create that knowledge, but for them to be able to do that. And that helps us as parents to be able to guide our parents, the kids, work with the teachers to help our learners or our kids to co-create that knowledge, not to expect to be fed by the teachers. And that goes along in what has been mentioned earlier on when Mary was talking about the kind of things that we need to do and the kind of learning that we need to do. Yes, there is the schooling, there is the academic bit of it, and we as parents can actually guide the children on going through the same thing. It is academics, yes. I don't have the papers to teach you as a teacher, but I can guide you, I can facilitate you, if only we go back to where we are saying that the learners also can generate their own learning. And therefore the parent can be a facilitator. You don't have to understand the curriculum, but you can guide the learners to see what is there, what is expected of them with the resources that they have to be able to generate their own learning and to be able to learn. Besides the school learning or the schooling that has been mentioned, again, going back to the basics, there are certain things that we, at this point in time, certain situations that have presented themselves to us. And more so for the urban center parents who were used to having children babied, we have all this number of nannies taking care of our children, and therefore they, in most cases, they can't even make their own beds. But with this new normal, as parents, besides checking what they can do, because one of the other things that they need to do is they have to set their own routine, and I'm glad Prof brought it up, that they need to come up with a routine, they need to come up with a schedule. One of the things that we must take care of is their mental health. And as Dahila said earlier on, that kids function in a structured environment. And at home, we must set that structured environment. We must help them create their own routines. We don't create the routines for them. Help them create their own routines. Help them design their own study worksheet or work timetable based on what they learn in the schools. And the parents' role here is to watch over them. This is irrespective of whether this parent is educated or not, whether they have gone to school or not, but they have a role to play to help. You don't need to go to school to oversee your child create a routine for themselves. You don't need to have gone to school to oversee your child create a timetable for themselves, and therefore help this learner to go through the daily routine and work with it. Recently, I want to share something that I did recently, and something that now has brought in a lot of attention. I even don't know how to deal with it. I recently ran a program called My Story Through the Lens, trying to put this in perspective, having come from the technology world. So I think technology, I do stuff using technology, even as much as I know that not every child has access to this technology or every parent has access to this technology. But anyhow, those that have should not also be disadvantaged and nothing created for them because they don't have, or because they have it and others don't. So recently we created a program called My Story Through the Lens. And this Story Through the Lens was to help the kids come up with meaningful activities during these pandemic times. And what that meant is that as they went through what they were going through, they learned to document. We trained them on some skills on taking good photographs, using whatever device that they have, be it via camera that they may have, borrowed camera from their parents, or the phones that their parents have, as long as it has a camera. So we took them through how to take good photos and how to document creatively their lives. And part of one of the activities that they did was to document a schedule that they took place in. So you take a day, and because you have already set your schedule from when you wake up to when you sleep, capture those moments from the beginning to the end and write creatively what you think about it. The results were amazing. And from that, the kids whom we went through with have been able to do this on a daily basis, that every time they feel distressed, they're able to take their cameras and create a story about what they're going through and what they can see. So generally, you can actually use any resource available to you to help the learners do this. In the absence of a camera, you can actually make these kids draw. They may not be very good at, they may not be very good in artwork, but they can draw stuff, or they can use whatever stuff that they have to just create stuff, to write stuff and create a routine and create a story that they can actually follow through. That way, one, you maintain their mental health, you involve them creatively. Three, they end up getting into a routine that is very helpful at this point in time. And part of that routine included schoolwork. And something Mary had said earlier on, that we have been occupying our children in schooling from 8 to 6. Now that they're at home, they're not in school, you're doing that. And that actually is destroying the child and not helping them. And therefore, it is very important to rethink, how do you occupy this child? 3 hours in a day is enough. Let them create that 3 hours. What do you do with the 3 hours? And see what happens. So there is the feedback that we've got from this particular project has been quite very helpful. We are actually thinking of scaling it up and involving more kids in doing this. They themselves, the kids we trained, are now working with other kids, and some have even started making money out of it. So some would say they're not available in class because there's a birthday party somewhere and they've been commissioned to go and take pictures, and therefore they will not attend class and they earn from it. So it was really something nice, something that shows that we can still support. And by the way, for them to participate in that particular program, they had to participate with their parents. We had to get the consent from the parents, for the parents to know that this is happening, because we expected the parents to monitor what was going on. And this is part of parent being a teacher in their lives. So basically, we need to, and in that point, we need to be, as parents, to fit within what our learners are doing. There is, Prof talked about it, the kind of things you do that you fit within the child's way of doing things. They are playful in nature. If they are, and I'm talking about the younger kids, fit within that playfulness. Whatever it is that they create, be part of that creation. If they're working with probably cooking or baking and stuff like that, be with them as they do it. As they make the rights and the wrongs, you're there to guide them and you're there to educate them. And that way, we'll see you as a parent playing your rightful role as a teacher, not an academic teacher, but an all-round kind of a teacher that you fit in to guide them in their academics and fit in to guide them on whatever it is that they are doing. So parents should identify, should be able to identify those things that the kids love, know what your kids want to do, and help raise their self-esteem. Because as you raise their self-esteem, then you make them feel secure and in whatever, and give them the confidence that they need for them to move in. If you show them that they are wishy-washy, that they're not very sure of what they're doing, then you destroy them. And you as a parent will not have fulfilled what you're supposed to do. At the end, secondly, I would want also to say that these kids are human beings, just like you are a human being. And whatever it is that your kids do, treat them as such, as human beings, the same way you are a human being. And that way, you will not expect things from them that are not put, I don't know how I want to put this, but some expectations that are not real on your children. So you need to do that and ensure that they are okay. For those parents who can access internet connectivity, they have the gadgets and so on. As a parent, you need to be aware of the online safety of your child. You need to know what sites they visit, especially as they do research. And as I said, when the child is a co-creator of knowledge, they will be expected to do some research on their own. They'll be expected to go out there and look for that information on their own. And part of where they look for that information would be online. So as a parent, it is important for you to know where your children go to, what sites they visit, even as they do that. And then again, to help them build netiquette so that as they are online and wherever it is that they are in, then they should be able to know how to behave in an online situation and how to take care of themselves while they are there. So basically that is what I would say. And capping it up, I would also talk about the parental engagement that KICD has developed. There is a manual on parental engagement that came out even before COVID because of CBC or competency-based curriculum, where we are saying we are all working towards bringing up that child. May it be you're a teacher or a parent. As a parent, it's a call now that you participate in the education of your child. And therefore, parental engagement is very important. KICD has developed a manual for parents on how they can engage with their children and how they can bring meaningful education to these children and make them co-creators of knowledge and not just people who just sit in and receive knowledge. And that's a problem we've had, that when they receive knowledge, it's just knowledge. They cannot apply it. But we are saying that they need not only to perceive it, but to do it. And that's why we are saying that we as parents also need to participate in creation of this knowledge. So I want to leave it at that, and then I'll take any questions that come up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Esther. We're so happy our microphone worked because that was so much for us to think about. And we are actually past our time, but I want to summarize so many of the things that have come up. But Esther, what really I really enjoyed listening to is this idea of becoming co-creators of knowledge, both for children, both for families, and regaining our sense of self, our sense of our ability and what we're able to, not just what we're able to do, but what we can create. And I really was struck with this idea of this being a time for students to learn about themselves, You know, who am I as a learner? When I create this routine for myself, am I someone that needs to work in 30-minute chunks and then take a 10-minute break? Am I the type of learner who has to go for an hour and any break will distract me? Do I need movement in between when I'm sitting down? You know, really understanding ourselves as a learner, which if we want our kids to go on higher ed, these are things when they become independent in university become sometimes, you know, very dramatic for kids. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to study without my parents now. So helping kids develop that real sense of self, of what works best for me, who am I? And that creates children and a generation that advocates for itself more, advocates for itself, and doesn't just become passive receivers of knowledge, but the creators of knowledge. And we get a different society when we have that. We don't just get different children in different families, but we create a very different society when, from a young age, kids understand who they are and what they need. I was also really fascinated across all the presenters of this idea of, you know, these things that we think are important, you know, random facts. What year did this war happen? What was the name of the president when this happened? Those can all come and go and learn, but there are certain skills that are both, you know, social and academic that can be taught with different material in your environment or in books. So this idea of like, how do I remember things? You know, am I remembering the plants in my community? Am I remembering historical dates in a history book? It's still the idea of what's a good strategy for me to memorize things? How do I analyze a situation? Am I analyzing the marketplace when I go with my mom and dad to sell vegetables? Or am I analyzing why a certain war started in 1682? What was the context for this? You know, am I doing math problems in a book, or am I doing math problems trading with my parents? So if we step back, I think, and look at what are the actual skills we want to learn. And, you know, the skills of memorizing, analyzing, applying come in our social lives. You know, how do I remember the names of my friends' birthdays? How do I understand when two friends are having a fight? When do I intervene? When do I not intervene? Those are the same things as understanding historical context or systems in science. So I think all of you have really brought up this idea of having confidence in ourselves, having trust in our children, and allowing them to really explore who they are in a structured way. Structure provides room for freedom, right? When we have routine and boundaries, it allows kids to do that, but also thinking, what is it we actually want to learn, and how do I use the context I'm in now, because we are not in a normal situation, to really redefine who we are. So we, you know, several of our speakers, Dr. Price Dennis had to go to another meeting, as do I, but she wanted to send her best and that she really loved learning with everybody. And we do have some questions, so we're going to compile them and then think creatively about how to deliver some of these answers for everybody. But I just want to give everyone, before we sign off, is there anything else you want to add, one last minute, to our participants? We still have a few people still on before we sign off.
I think my interest is Esther, because I'm our parents, and whatever she has discussed there, there are so much touching. One, there's this animal they call CPC, which has come to the parents. We don't know, we know the start, don't know the head. Now, the issue of synthesizing the parents, how are you going to make sure the parent, the attitude that we have up to now? Those who now, like now, this COVID time, you are going, there is no education for the whole year. Now we have other children from who are supposed now to go to start the school. How are you going to cope with that situation? Because the government, even if we look at the infrastructures, we don't see whether they're in place. Second, you brought about the tabs for the standard, the nursery, when you brought them. What happened? That project never picked up to now. Does it mean we will be using, you will be using the parents' money or the taxes for the government to bring a project that does not succeed? Because to launch that one and maybe the people to assess the information that you brought, it takes almost 35 minutes. So the parents sent me and told me they are not competent in CBC. Even the teachers themselves, they don't know where to start and where to end. Because even the ones who have trained compared with the number of the pupils, they are not enough. Thank you.
You want me to answer that?
Can I just share something before Esther answers that on behalf of the government? I just want to say that one thing I've understood with the COVID crisis is that responsibility has been placed on all of us as individuals, as parents, as communities, to manage ourselves and to cope with this situation. We've been given a protocol, for example, washing hands and social distancing, but the how and the actual implementation has been left to us as family, community, you know, a town, you know, basically, we've been left to ourselves to manage that. So what I would say is that the solution that we should be having should be coming from within ourselves. We should be meeting and coming up with solutions within ourselves instead of still waiting for the government to come up with something that will solve a problem, a national problem. And so we already have guidelines, and we, for example, with CBC, we already have guidelines. We know what they've been trying to achieve. So as parents, and for you, Mr. Kobia, you're head of a lot of national parents, you should be able to try and think of ways of these people in all these sub-counties and subgroups can come up with things that are going to solve problems within their own community, their own families, their own setting, their villages, and that way we'll manage this problem rather than waiting for the government to come up with a national problem. The government is already dealing with COVID-19 on a national level, and they are still not managing because we ourselves are not cooperating. And so the solution is coming within us, within our families and within our communities. And you have all the opportunity to sensitize all these parents to look within themselves. And if you need experts, like for example, I can come and share with them tips on what they can do. You don't need to keep waiting for a national government to come and solve the problem. I think we can come up with solution ourselves and open our parents' minds, and they have everything within them. It's just that they don't know and they're not using it. We all have all the resources we need within ourselves. We just need someone to wake us up and tell us, this is what you can do. And then they'll be like, oh, only this, okay, I can do this. And you'll see a transformation of the children, the parents, the community, and it's not any government, it's us. We have the power to change everything within ourselves. So you have the power to tell the parents to look inwards. Instead of telling them to parents to look externally, tell parents to look inwards within themselves. So Esther,
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you very much, Mary, for getting me out of that. It's one thing that really gets into us. Yes, because as we speak, and Mary has rightfully said, it is our mindset as parents. The same mindset as parents where we believed that we have to pass exams and our kids must go to university and do whichever. And that made us go into drilling our children to pass exams. That is still in the mindset that we are in. And it's a mindset that we need to get out of for us to be able to embrace competency-based curriculum. It is that mindset that have made us produce the kind of children that we have right now who depend on what is fed on them and not what they can do on their own. And competency-based curriculum is coming at a point to try and get us back to that where we wanted them to be. Get them back to doing things on their own, to learning by themselves, and to have the parents work with them in their education. We have parents, Mr. Kobia, the ones you're talking about, are the ones who are saying that they're overburdened by this CBC because they are supposed to help their children create stuff. And what have your parents been doing? When we tell them to make something, we are going, for example, when we were doing grade 3, we were going to the market to sweep the market. Your parents went and bought wheelbarrows, went and bought aprons and made gloves, and bought gloves and so on. Parents in the rural areas made these things on their own. They got sacks and made aprons. They got carton boxes and made wheelbarrows. They got branches and made brooms. And that is what we are saying, that these kids need to be creative on their own to be able to produce what they expected. Those children, the kids whose parents bought things for them, did not learn that skill of co-creation of knowledge, as I'm talking about. They did not learn the skill of making things by themselves because they were brought to them by the parents. So ultimately, and thank you, Mary, for saying this, parents need to get out of that mindset. They need to get out of where they are and embrace the new change that we are talking about. And actually, CBC has become very difficult in implementing because the parents have been very reluctant. alongside the teachers, some of who also do not want to change from the old to the new. So if parents can really help us by accepting to embrace this, then it will become very easy for all of us to implement this and bring out that child we all want to see in the future. So in terms of capacity building, I talked about the parental engagement guidelines that have already been produced. Please look out for them. They are there by KICD, which you can alert your parents that they exist so that they can use that, and that will ease their way of supporting learning among their kids. Number two, you talked about the digital literacy project, and you said that this digital project was a facade, so if I may say so. But I'll say, having worked on this digital project myself for a long time, where this was, it's the same thing with what I've just mentioned earlier on. Lack of support, lack of staying in the same old mindset has helped it not, has worked against this project in some places and not in all. In places where this has worked, and I wish you would go to some of the schools in the deep parts of the country, it's the best thing that ever happened to them. We didn't need any internet. They have content. Take this device, the kids who use the devices are able to manage those devices on their own without the help of the teacher. They can get them, use them to create the knowledge I was talking about, because they have an assignment where they're learning about leaves. They'll go out with the gadgets, take pictures of these leaves, and come and translate them in the class. So again, the project worked. It is still working. I know we have, we had a delay, not a delay, but capacity building 300,000 teachers is really something. So we've been working on capacity building of those teachers to be able to implement CBC and to be able to use ICT integration in that. And we went ahead to even create some online programs that the teachers themselves can access on their mobile phones to help them by step by step on how they can teach CBC, and also how they can use the gadgets in their schools to be able to do that. The proactive teachers have moved they have taken in this and they have moved very far with this. And the benefit is on their children. You can actually see what has become of those children who've had proactive parents, proactive teachers, because the learning outcomes have been good. So my challenge is to you to please support government. As Mary has said, government is dealing with very many other things. The children are ours as parents. Let us join in whatever the government has. It has the best thoughts for us and trying to make things better for us. So let us embrace that and help it where it can by we as parents doing what we are supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's, I think we can do this webinar 5 more times or for 5 more hours, but to respect everyone's time, in closing, I want to, in light of the essence of what our speakers are bringing, I want to encourage every single person on this call right now, everyone who's a participant. You are a participant in this discussion, you're a participant in this society. So we call on you to really think about what is your role? How can you support? If you're a parent on this call, how can you do some deep soul searching into what you have? And really, and I know because I'm from Egypt, another African country, and it's been trained out of us that we don't have resources, that we always have to look out to, whether it's to Europe, whether it's to our government, whether it's to someone, that we've lost sight of how much we have inside of us. So everyone on this call, you're an individual and you're a member of a community. So what are the talents you have? And if you're on this call, you're a leader because you're interested, you made time to come to this. What can you do in your own household? What resources do you have? And how do you reach out to others in your community? How do you support the parents in your network to reach out at least to these speakers for support, to receive some more training, but also to access what they have? So I really encourage every single participant on this call to heed this, call to create a new society by really understanding the wealth we have inside of us and the wealth we can contribute to others in our community. And I'm going to ask this question of all of us: who do we want to be when we come out of this crisis? Because it is a crisis, but they pass and we will move on. Who do we want to become? What's the big picture we want to design? What are the changes in society we want to make? So to think at that level, but then to bring it down to the day-to-day. Great, I have this vision of what we can be. What do I need to do today to achieve that? Do I need to go through my house and look at what can be used to learn language or math? or science. So always holding the grand, big picture in our mind, but taking it down to the step-by-step into small, manageable, bite-sized pieces to begin with. We all have that within us, and we all have the possibility of creating a different society at the end of this. Thank you so much for being here with all of us today. Hopefully you'll see this group again together, because I think we do have hours and hours of discussion left. Have a great evening, everyone, or afternoon or morning, wherever you are. Bye-bye.